Spring Fling is tomorrow, and all of the acts have finally been announced. But there's a very special component to this Spring Fling that the production team has been keeping under wraps. Stay tuned to find out more.
And we sit down with Mary Miller in one of her last interviews as Dean of Yale College. She remembers her best accomplishments, her biggest regrets, and what her ideal Mayan headdress would look like.
Stay tuned for these stories and more. It's your Yale, your week, and your news.
Hello and welcome to YTV. I'm Madison Alworth and today is April 25th, 2014. To begin, we'll go to Raleigh Cavero in the newsroom for this week's headlines.
Thanks, Madison. After 2 rounds of voting in 1 week, the Yale student body finally has a new president, Michael Herbert. Herbert won about 52% of the vote in a runoff against Liam Motzkin, lasting from Tuesday morning to Wednesday night. In the first round of elections last week, Herbert edged Motzkin by winning 30% of the vote to Motzkin's 28%. The Yale College Council's election rules state that any candidate receiving less than 40% of the vote has to beat the runner-up by 10% to be declared the winner. Herbert's term begins the first day of summer break. And thanks to a combination of the flu and tonsillitis, the lineup for Spring Fling underwent dramatic changes earlier this week. On Tuesday, Chance the Rapper canceled his performance after being hospitalized last Sunday. Facing a short timeline and a tight budget, the Spring Fling committee booked New York City-based rapper Ja Rule to perform instead. Ja Rule, who debuted in 1999, has released 8 albums and hits like Mesmerize and Always on Time. Last November, New Haven made its way into national headlines when police responded to a phony tip about a gunman headed towards Yale's campus. On Wednesday afternoon, the man responsible for that hoax was arrested by New Haven police. The accused is 50-year-old Jeffrey Jones of Westport, Connecticut. During the November incident, police identified a man walking with a distinctive gait on security footage shot near the scene of the crime. On December 6th, they picked up a man matching his description, and he was later identified as Jones. 2 months ago, a voice analysis confirmed the police's suspicions about him, leading to the arrest this week. Jones is also a suspect in a false threat made about Hill House High School in December. And this week, over 1,000 high school seniors flocked to Yale's campus to get a taste of what life is like as a Bulldog. From Tuesday afternoon to Thursday morning, the recently admitted pre-frosh attended over 200 events, ranging from master classes to the extracurricular bazaar. About 2,000 students were accepted to the class of 2018 out of 31,000 applicants. That made for a record low admission rate this year of 6.26%. And that's it for this week's headlines. Despite disappointment over the last-minute cancellation, this year's Spring Fling has more in store. The production crew has something up its sleeve that could make tomorrow's concert unlike anything Yale has ever seen. Joseph Vinson brings us more.
Electronic music is becoming increasingly popular both at Yale and across the nation. This year, the Spring Fling committee chose Diplo as the concert's headliner. Electronic artists are known for their music and exciting production. According to the Spring Fling production team, Yaleys are in for a treat.
People are starting to see a DJ, like Diplo, as someone who is an artist in their own right. And you can also see this with the production that you're going to see at the Spring Fling concert.
With the rise of EDM music and sort of standalone performers, the production value becomes an extremely integral part of their show. Without creating a whole vision for the show, something is lost in the shows.
This year, the Spring Fling committee created a brand new production team that has worked to make the show even more exciting and interactive.
The reasoning behind the Spring Fling production team is that we have students on campus who have experience with it.
The organisers have said that this year a lot more thought has gone into the stage, the lights and the aesthetics of the event.
Well, especially with Spring Fling, since we have so many different genres performing, it's not just Diplo. I think that they have an eye to that when they're thinking about the lighting design.
In terms of the physical logistics, it's the same basic stage that you saw last year, but pretty much everything else has changed. It's a lot more complicated, a lot more fun, and we hope it's going to be a lot more interactive.
This is just essentially just showing what the truss structure is going to look like. And while this like outer area right here is pretty standard, there's some truss structure on stage that makes it a lot more interesting. And we work very closely with Diplo's LD lighting designer, and essentially he's given us a plot, and we've like worked from that to make sure that, you know, every artist can get the production value that they want and they get everything that they need.
The team has also introduced something that has never before been seen at Spring Fling.
We've been trying to figure out how to make this show more interactive and how to make this show more encompassing for everyone who attends Spring Fling. And so what we decided to do is pull the audience into the light show. We decided to go with these bracelets. So the first 1,500 people at Spring Fling will get a bracelet that says Spring Fling. They will go on every person's wrist, and they are LED controllable wirelessly from our light board, which is, here's the small version of what we're going to use for the show, but we can control the lights that will be on every person's wrist to go along with Diplo's light show, to go along with the other performers, so that it actually pulls the entire audience into what's happening.
The production team has worked hard on creating the Spring Fling experience.
I just tried to create like one cohesive visual so that everything from the bracelet on people's wrists to the app on the phone feels like one like product. Having a lot of graphics, just high volume, and a lot of visibility, a lot of polish makes the whole thing just feel bigger.
One thing's for sure, this year's production team promises to put on a good show. For YTV, this has been Joseph Vincent.
Tomorrow's opening act goes on at 3 p.m. and Diplo rounds out the night at 9.
This year, a new course called Art and Biomolecular Recognition Lab was added to Yale's Blue Book. There, students learn to develop biochemical ways to preserve and restore art.
It aimed to unite science and art in one classroom, but in the process, it inspired much more.
Lily Rifkin and Kristen Mendes bring us the story of one student whose passion for science and art continued far beyond the lab's walls.
Lillian Shee looks like any other pre-med engrossed in an experiment. What you might not expect is that she's an econ major, studying the biochemical pathways of art. She, like many of the students in this lab, are not science majors. Last semester, Lillian was part of a new lab course called Biochemistry and Art. 50 applied and only 12 were admitted.
And any student could take it, but it would be aimed at students who weren't necessarily studying science. And they would have their own projects, and it would bridge art conservation and molecular biophysics.
During the semester, they learned how to biochemically recognize color and studied the highly valued Lapis blue on the Virgin's robe.
And Yale is kind of known for these cool like interdisciplinary classes where you like meld, I don't know, like your love of history for like your passion for like photography or something, you know, weird classes that really force students to think.
A lot of the students were art history majors, and some were chemistry majors. Some of them came from all different backgrounds, so they hadn't ever really thought about art objects any deeper than the sort of iconography that was on the surface of the object.
Like we were like an eclectic mix of people. I was an econ major, there was like a comp sci major, someone was majoring in psychology. Of course there were a few science majors as well, but I think what really held us together was our like love for art.
The class not only explores the science behind art preservation, but also how and why it affects the piece's artistic value.
So, for example, what kind of material that's been used in a painting may have some sort of relevance to the scholarship of that painting. So it may have something to do with authentication, if you're wondering whether a painting is from a specific era or by a specific artist. Learning more about the actual chemical makeup of the painting can actually reveal quite a bit.
Within the course, each student pursues his or her own preservation project. For example, one student used lead soap to determine how an oil painting should be stored and restored. For Lillian Shee, her project inspired her to pursue preservation beyond the classroom.
So for instance, one project was a bowl like this. It was Ming Dynasty pottery. This may not be from the Ming Dynasty, we can't authenticate it, but it's certainly a blue-white glaze. And so this student asked the question of whether she could develop a tool, a molecular tool that could recognize and date the blue glaze of pots like this.
And what I was trying to do was to determine the provenance via molecular target and phage display of these pieces, so that eventually our conservators and maybe auction house people can use this.
Just 2 weeks ago, her research earned the prestigious Frank E. Fellowship for the Advancement of Humanities in the Sciences. It will fund her continued research that she hopes to publish in the fall.
So I'm the only one currently doing independent research, but hopefully that will change.
From YTV, this has been Kristen Mendez and Lily Rifkin.
The course will be offered for a second time this fall, and it is cross-listed with MB&B and History of Art.
As the spring athletics season comes to a close, many of Yale's freshman athletes are just getting their bearing in the Ivy League. Not so for the softball team.
Although the team has stumbled to a 5-32 record, a strong season from the class of 2017 has the Bulldogs looking forward to a promising future. We go to Kate Walker for more.
Thanks, guys. This group of 6 freshmen has been asked to take on a major role this season for the Bulldogs, combining to take over a third of the team's at-bats and pitch 40% of the team's innings.
We really have a solid group that has stepped into outrageous roles that have really transformed over the season. We've had injuries, we've had change of positions, and I think all of them have really stepped up into a role and they've all contributed this year.
I mean, they came right in and, first game when they stepped on the field in the fall, they weren't afraid. Easy transition for them, just a lot of confidence and came in just, again, like I said, no fear.
Pitcher Lindsey Eflint has led the group from the mound. The Illinois native has tossed a team-high 94 innings and leads the Bulldogs with a 2.9 ERA.
The power that she has is amazing, but I think what's even more important is the drive that she has mentally, and she's really focused, she's really driven, she wants to win, and you can see that every time she throws the ball.
The freshman Bulldogs have contributed day in and day out throughout the season, with 5 appearing in the starting lineup regularly. However, they've also played beyond their years by stepping up in big moments for the team. Freshman shortstop Lena Doe and outfielder Caroline McGuire both played important roles in the team's dramatic victory over Princeton on April 5th. Doe single-scored in the bottom of the 7th inning to seal the 2-1 win for the Bulldogs.
I think the highlight for the season for me was hitting the walk-off hit against Princeton. It was bottom of the 7th with 2 outs, runners on 2nd and 3rd, and I hit a line drive up the middle and scored the winning runs.
The Bulldogs haven't seen the results on the field, but they think that this year's challenges have helped them make gains in mental toughness that will pay off next season.
So when we're playing a 4-game series against Harvard, we're two runs away from a win. We're a big hit away from a win. So I absolutely see progress.
In most of the games, some we've had the lead and then we just can't get the clutch hit when they come back with one, which I think is something that we can easily improve on.
The softball team is looking to end their season on a high note this weekend in their 4-game series against Brown. Heading into next season, the Bulldogs hope this exceptional freshman class will help the program to Ivy League glory. For YTV, this has been Kate Walker.
Thanks, Kate. The softball team will conclude its season with a doubleheader against Brown on Saturday afternoon at DeWitt Family Field.
And as always, we leave you with our Everybody Has a Story segment. This week, Cody Pomeranz sat down with Yale College Dean Mary Miller. Miller's time as dean, which started in 2008, is drawing to a close with the end of this semester. During her tenure, Yale has dealt with questions surrounding sexual misconduct and mental health, made important changes to university career services, and also has seen the growth and movement forward in the building of 2 new residential colleges. Here are a few highlights from that interview.
Dean Miller, thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure.
Pleasure
to talk to you.
You're returning to academia and full-time teaching. What do you think should be Yale's criteria, not only in hiring teachers, but rewarding them and retaining them? There's obviously the famous phrase in academia, publish or perish. Does Yale place too much emphasis on scholarship at the expense of actually hiring good instructors?
Over the past few years, one of the things I have seen and played a very active role in is how teaching is considered at the time of promoting faculty to positions of tenure. And in all the tenure committees, one of the things that we now expect, it's not as though this can be brushed under the rug, is what is the role for good teaching? And how do departments have the opportunity to coach individuals? How do we take advantage of the fact that we have had here someone like Joe Handelsman, whose credentials as a national leader in the teaching of STEM led President Obama to recruit her to Washington for a couple of years to head his Council on Science and Technology because of her belief that science teaching has has by and large quite a distance to go to catch up with the success of pedagogy in other fields. I think Yale is now an incredibly successful incubator for all different kinds of pedagogical innovation. Whether it's gotten pretty routine to have a flipped classroom, but in fact your flipped classroom can't be successful unless you have the kind of incredible set of tape lectures that a Paul Bloom has, or a Laurie Santos has, or a Steve Stearns has. So that having these kinds of tools, and it's one of the ways that the university has invested in making it possible for faculty to innovate.
Now let's switch to some more student-centered issues. There were no students initially on the ad hoc grading committee. There was no student representation on the presidential search, and there was a major push to ensure that there was a student on a search for your replacement as Dean of Yale College. What do you think the role of students is in university governance? Obviously, we have a new YCC president by the time this interview airs. What areas should students have influence? And more importantly, are there areas where students shouldn't have influence?
It's such an interesting set of questions you ask, Cody, because there's so many different pieces of this. I do think that there are so many important roles for students to play on the committees of Yale College, and in fact, students play some of the most key roles in some of the most important committees. For example, the Executive Committee, Teaching, Learning, and Advising, Course of Study, all of our standing committees that are part of how student life and academics unfold. We've also worked really carefully with different YCC standing committees that will often serve in parallel and as sounding boards. So the Dean's Advisory Committee is a committee that I meet with several times a year, specifically in order to take the pulse, sometimes in order to figure out what are the problems that we haven't been thinking about in Yale College. For example, we have off and on during my tenure been spending a lot of time thinking about career services and being able to take the advice of the Student Advisory Committee at least once a year about career services really led to the reinvention of that office. We are on our third director of it in my time here, and we have had exceptionally engaged students involved in the various searches and thinking about what should an office like this look like in the 21st century. So there are different kinds of, there's all student committees that can serve advisory to me, and I believe now the president and the provost also have student advisory committees to be able to act in an ad hoc way. And after the Student Advisory Committee worked with the ad hoc committee on grading in the first year of its existence, students were appointed in order to become part of something that looked for a while as though, how long is this committee going to last? Is it going to become one of the standing committees where we would normally appoint students? At the same time, I think this is one of the interesting questions about governance altogether, is that Yale is not a democracy. What we hope it is that there are informed decisions that act with advice from many different, whether it's the formation of the faculty senate, how the faculty will register their concerns about the academic review committee, that one wants to be able to go out and ask the question, what are we missing here? How do we make this a better document? Because so many decisions actually roll up from, say, the faculty to the corporation, or from me to the officers, to the president, to the corporation as well.
We'll shift into our last part of the interview, which is just a speed round of fun questions. We do this at the end of every interview, so they're quick and enjoyable. First one, President Salve, mustache or no mustache?
No mustache.
Number 2, design of your own Mayan headdress. What would it look like?
A lot of endangered species.
Number 3, this is one we asked both President Levin and President Salve. Have you ever had a Wenzel?
Never.
Never. You know what one is, though.
I do, but I worry that, like Bill de Blasio, is going to be eating the pizza with a fork and knife to admit to never having eaten a Wenzel.
Oh, well, it's on camera now. Don't worry, President Salve knew what it was. President Levin, less so. I think that was the fork and the knife situation.
Okay. Not on my diet, I think.
Number 4, one thing you think all Yale students should do before graduating. Obviously, commencement is coming up. What should these seniors run to at Yale before graduating?
Yale University Art Gallery. Unbelievable in its transformation, and as it reopened on 12/12/12.
Number 5, and our final one, names of Yale residential colleges. What should we be looking for? Any famous Yale alums that stick out in your mind?
The corporation has said it may not be for a living person, and that they reserve the right to offer that name. And there are some great 19th century names. While I was master of Saybrook College, I worked very hard to make the name of Edward Boucher more prominent by putting him his name over a beautiful entryway. I don't know what college you're in, but Saybrook and Branford have the names of the great worthies up to 1917, and they could never have even thought about Edward Boucher. So sometimes we go back into the deep past to try to make sure that we see the stones differently from this distance. I'd say think about one of the things to consider is perhaps a town, or perhaps the city of New Haven itself. And one of the names that I'm most fond of, I think not very high on anyone else's list, is Hill House, for whom we have a street, but who is an active abolitionist.
The most beautiful street.
Most beautiful street in New Haven, in the United States. So it was said in the 19th century. But I think as an abolitionist and member of this community, and an activist who was committed to a change that he would not fully see, that is what we all want to be.
Well, I am in Brantford, so we've got a good sibling rivalry with Saybrook next door. Dean Miller, thanks so much for joining us, and congratulations on 6 years.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us, as always. For YTV, I'm Cody Pomerantz, and you can look for more Everybody Has a Story segments coming up. We've got a special one, a surprise one for commencement, so we'll see you then.
To see the full interview, go to the YTV website under the features page.
And that's it for us tonight, our final show of the year.
Thank you so much for staying tuned every Friday throughout the year.
It's been a fantastic first year of YTV, and we look forward to many more.
To end our final show, we leave you with the highlights of the Mr. Yale competition, in case you couldn't make it to the full event.
We'll see you again in the fall. It's your Yale, your week, and your news.
I'm too sexy for my love, too sexy for my love, love's going to leave me. So sexy it hurts, and I am too sexy for Milan, too sexy for Milan, New York and Japan. And I am too sexy for your party, too sexy for your party, the way I'm disco dancing.